say you graduate school and now you're applying for a higher up position. If you know, and it's a traveling position, right? You're going to go internationally, work in different countries. Knowing these languages is that extra qualification is huge. It's paramount.
When you're young, that's the best time to learn a language, or I would say almost anything, I think, because that's when your brain, I don't know what it is, honestly, but it just, you learn it.
The younger you are and the more exposed you are to other languages, studies have shown that it's way more beneficial. So this one's going to be something that's kind of close to both of us. It's 2 languages, raising kids while being bilingual or trilingual, you know, the more languages, the better, right? You were born in Poland, so obviously you learn Polish first, right?
Yep.
Funny enough that I was born here, but because both my parents are, well, I'm first generation born here. Polish was my first language too. I actually learned English by watching Blue's Clues and TV shows, and then obviously my parents too. But yeah,
I learned it by listening to music.
English. Mm-hmm. What were you listening to? Eminem, 50 Cent?
I don't remember. Just anything that was on the radio. Like I would sit in the car, right in the back seat, whatever my parents were playing or whatever was on.
I'm back
listening
in Poland.
to it. No, here.
Here. So you came here not knowing
any English, yeah. And then see, I would know the words. I didn't know what they would mean, so I would know like how to say it because of I would hear it right on the songs. So I would know how to say them and everything, but I didn't know yet what they mean. So then later in school, that's when it started to click. I'm like, oh, okay, I know this word, but now I know what it means, right? And that's how I learned it.
Okay. Do you think it's beneficial to know
a language,
more than one language that young?
I honestly am not sure. I think it's slowly less and less beneficial. I think back in the day, it was more beneficial, right? Because you don't have the translators or anything like that. Like, for example, I wanted to learn like a lot of different languages. But then like 5 years ago, when I actually started to learn one language, I was like, with like Google and everything, I don't know if this is just a waste of time or what, because you could literally get the answer by speaking to the phone and you could just translate it to someone, right? So like before you would actually need it because where else are you going to get it, right? I mean, sure, maybe the books or something, but to find that answer takes a long time. So at that point, it's a lot easier just to learn the language if you're going to Mexico or something, right? And know how to speak their language. But now you literally just bring up the phone and it's going to say it for you. So now do I think it's beneficial? I mean, I don't know, honestly.
See, I think the younger you are and the more exposed you are to other languages, studies have shown that it's way more beneficial because your brain I don't know what I'm looking for here with the word, but it doesn't expand, but it's like your ability to understand multiple languages helps develop your brain in a certain way that your comprehension is better. And it's also easier to learn a new language the younger you are. The older you get, it's a lot harder. It's like playing the piano, learning how to play the piano. The younger you are, a lot easier. The older you get, it gets harder and harder.
The learning part, I definitely agree, because I do think that the younger you are, it's easier to learn things.
But the reasoning behind learning an extra language, you're saying it's less important now.
Yeah.
Because of the ability of translators.
Because but what you also just said, like you're kind of expanding, right, on your mind and stuff like that when you're learning a different language. But you could say the same thing. The more you learn about anything, you're expanding your mind, right? So like now, if you're just learning, let's say as a young,
I think that's not exactly where I was going with that. It's the comprehension, like just knowing multiple languages versus just knowing one language. The way your brain works, I don't know if the studies, if it's more efficiently or what. It just knowing 2 or more languages is more beneficial that with the obvious of like going to another country and speaking the language, but it's the way your brain is now wiring itself throughout the growth process.
That's exactly what I understood from that. And my argument against that is like, if I learn not, let's say, Spanish or whatever language, I'm now learning science. I'm also expanding my brain, right? Like, because now I'm kind of understanding, or let's do a different example. Let's do like, okay, learning about construction or marriage, right? Now I'm kind of using all that, or even business like we do it, right? You could say that by learning a lot of business, you kind of expanded your brain because a lot of those things could be taken into a lot of different areas of your life, right? So you studied business, and in your argument, you're saying you're studying a second language. So I'm saying, okay, if you use the same amount of time studying a second language or use the same amount of time studying business, at the end of the day, let's say 5 years down the line, is your mind going to develop the same amount or exactly the way you're saying, just in 2 different things? You know what I mean?
I'm curious to see if there has been studies on that, because I personally don't know that aspect of it. I just know that the studies that they have done was specifically one language learners only versus multi-language learners.
Yeah,
and the way your brain is.
And that study, I think, 100%, I would agree. If you're saying that, and let's say we're not taking anything else you could learn, and you're just learning the language, a second, third, or fourth language, I 100% think that it's going to expand your brain, make you smarter, make you think, outside the box, as you want to call it. So that 100% I agree with. I'm just saying that, okay, what if you take that time and not learn the language, but learn something else and expand your brain that way, I think at the end, the outcome is going to be the same, whether you spent that time learning the language or you spent, that time learning something else. You're still expanding your brain, it's just in a different area.
I wonder if it's the same part of the brain you're obviously learning, so some of it overlaps, but is it now because it's a different language, is it a different part of the brain that's learning versus, like you said, a business or construction or science, anything else that's non-language based? Is it the same part of the brain that's learning and expanding?
Let's see, maybe someone will know for sure. I would think it's the same part of the brain. It's just a different area, right? Like of expertise that you're learning or something like that. But I still think it's developing the same part of the brain.
I think what you touched on with the translators and Google and all that, like having those, I've gotten hit with ads for handheld devices. Like you said, you talk into it, you preset on the little touch screen, like, okay, input language will be English, output language, do Mandarin, right? You talk into it, and then it'll output in Mandarin. And then whoever you're talking to will now talk in Mandarin, and then the output will be in English to you. So yeah, you could definitely go to a new country with a translator and have like a handheld device translator and have full-blown conversations, but
the only problem is if you run out of internet or battery, right?
That's the thing. I think we're definitely going into an era of the world is going to be completely having coverage of internet. I think Elon wants to accomplish that with Starlink. So I think it's still a young concept. And I think over time, in the next several decades, once we have connectivity in everywhere.
Yeah, all over the place.
That's going to be standard into phones next, or watches.
Yep.
devices that are on you at all times. I mean, going into a little something different, but with the use, like ease of use, Jess and I went to the farmer's market this morning. And when I went to the baseball game yesterday with Kevin, I didn't bring my whole wallet. I just brought my card and my driver's license with my phone attached, like a little wallet. I ended up forgetting that at home this morning, and I didn't have my card, but I had it on Apple Pay. So
it's convenient
everything
now.
that we were buying at the farmer's market, everybody had a little square device or whatever they were using, and they're like, cash or card. We were like, card, and it was just tap with the phone. It was
now
that
I
easy.
think
And
I
your-
think
your
in
watch
already
can do
couple
it.
states, they already are allowing the driver's license to be like on the
Yep.
phone. I don't
Yep.
think it's all 50, but I think
No.
like 4 of them or something already approved it. So
Once that happens, wallets are going to be pretty much obsolete.
yeah, and that's how I think about the languages nowadays, you know. But yeah, it's a huge thing that if you go and there's no internet or there's no coverage, then that would be an issue, right?
Right.
And I don't know how you would solve that. But then again, if you're going to those places where there is no internet, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess those would be the only. That would be the only problem that I see, and why you would need to learn it. But how often are you going to a place like that, right, where you would need to learn it? So, in my opinion, the only time that you would actually benefit from this is if you needed that language. Like, let's say if you're hiring a lot of people that only speak a certain language, you would want to communicate with them, right, to have that advantage. So like in scenarios like that, I see that being a huge benefit. Or if you know that you're going to be living in Mexico for 6 months out of the year, where you truly want to connect and be fluent, like in those situations, I guess I would say that's the only time where I would say, okay, that's good to know the second language. But apart from that, I don't really see another scenario anymore that, you know, would benefit you knowing a second language.
Greta, can you look up what the top 4 most spoken languages are in the world? Because I feel like if you know, I'm sure English is up there. It's going to be I'm guessing English, French, Mandarin, and Hindi.
I think Hindi
English, Mandarin, Hindi,
and not French and
Spanish. French was 5th. Okay. So I feel like if you can speak Spanish is easy, right? It's easier. French is a little bit tougher. I think Hindi is tougher as well. I've heard Mandarin's not super hard, and English is taught everywhere, right? Or for the most part, a lot of countries are now and doing English as a second language. I feel like if you learn those 5 languages as a kid, you could damn near go anywhere in the world, in any country, and be able to speak to
Pretty much.
almost anybody.
And that would be the best time to do it, because like we discussed earlier, when you're young, that's the best time to learn a language, or I would say almost anything, I think, because that's when your brain, I don't know what it is, honestly, but it just, you learn it, you know? Like me trying to learn a second language now, it's not as easy as it was because it just naturally happened back then. Now it's like you actually have to want to do it, you know, and you're distracted by so many different things. I feel like that's probably what contributes to that. But yeah, if you do learn those 5 languages early on, which that's when it's the easiest, then you're going to have a much better time.
I took Spanish for 9 years, from 1st grade all the way to freshman year of high school. And then for whatever.
From when? Freshman?
1st grade to
First grade.
freshman year of high school. So 9 years.
You
And
should be fluent by now.
I was back then. And I could read still. I could speak some, but I could understand a lot. Like if I go to Mexico, I could understand a lot. And it'll take me a little bit to respond, but reading, I could still read it. And stupid of me, because I decided to jump to Italian sophomore year. and
Instead of continuing.
instead of continuing with Spanish. I should have gone through all of high school learning Spanish, and then freshman year of college, I was like, well, I want to get better with my Polish because I stopped going to Polish school in like 4th or 5th grade, and that was stupid on my part. I should have continued that all the way through high school because it's harder for me now. Like, I've been really focusing on learning it more again because the alphabet's a pain in the ass. Even my dad says, like, the endings of some words, you can
In
have
Spanish?
like Polish.
In Polish,
you
yeah,
could, you
that's
could
a
have
tough
like
one.
20, 30 different variations of one word
Yeah.
by just with the endings, and knowing when to have those endings is a pain in the ass to know too. So my biggest regrets were not continuing Polish and Spanish all the way through high school, because I would have been fluent in 3 languages. I would say I'm fluent in Polish because I could full on have a conversation with people.
But see, that's the thing. Like, even though you learn it, you have to be around
Right.
that language,
Right.
or else you're gonna start to forget. So, like, take me for example, right? I was born in Poland. First language was Polish. I went to school learning Polish for many, many years until I think I was like 15 or something. So I knew it really well. But now, 30, right? 31, and I forgot a lot of the words, right? My reading is not as good as it was. My writing of it is not as good as it was. And without like the translator, which goes back to the technology, I probably would not know how to write a lot of the words, right? Now I could write them because it will quickly translate it, right? You start to write it and it gives you like 3 different options. You're like, you know, this one's the right one.
Right.
But if you were to write it yourself, not a chance I would write it correctly, you know?
For
So
sure.
it's like, and back then in school, it was like they wanted you to make sure you know all of that stuff. And from what I remember, I knew how to write these things back in the day, 15 years ago, right? But now, and I'm around that language quite a lot, right? Because my parents speak it, a lot of my family speak it, and you still forget. So now imagine you learn a language and you stop being around people that speak that language. After a long time, you're going to forget, I would say probably half that language, you know?
For sure.
So learning it is one thing, but now, you know, what's the point if you're not going to really use it? You're going to forget most of it.
Yeah.
So now taking that into account, which I didn't even think of in the beginning, I feel like, yeah, you really need a specific like need for the language if you're going to learn it, or at least
Have the desire to use it, like listen to music in that language, watch movies in that language, which
get a job like a translator for like a government job or something, like
For sure.
do something with it. Then I see it as a huge benefit, you know?
or that is another big point that you touched on, jobs, right? I feel like if you know multiple languages, 3+, I feel like a lot of people are bilingual at this point, right? It's just kind of standard. If you know 3 or more languages, getting 4, 5, you put that on, let's say, a college application, you know, that you know that. Versus you have, me and you are the same, right? On paper, we're applying to, Harvard, right? We got the same GPA, we did the same kind of sports, all American in the sport, we did band, whatever. I know 2 languages and you know 5 languages, you're automatically going to be, I wouldn't say automatically, but you have that higher chance of getting accepted, right? Because that people will be like, well, no, duh, because the qualification
Getting accepted into what?
into the school, right?
Oh, into the school.
into Harvard in this scenario, right? Where the acceptance rate is so low. I think acceptance into Harvard is like 3.9% of applicants get approved or get accepted, right? Jobs too. Say you graduate school and now you're applying for a higher up position. If you know and it's a traveling position, right? You're going to go internationally, work in different countries. Knowing these languages is...
You have that extra qualification, right?
That extra qualification is huge. It's paramount.
Yeah, in those scenarios, but at the end of the day, like, does it really matter? Because what if that in those scenarios,
you're going to go back to the translator.
No, not the translator, but now let's go in the scenario. What if everything, like you said, that's all the same, but now you're better looking than me? You might have a job in acting or something that you might get picked up on before me just because I know a different language. I might be better suited for this role, but you might be suited for a different role, right? So, like, does that really matter?
Well, now you're going off based on looks for a certain... That is specific to a look.
Yeah.
That I think you would have...
But so you were saying, like, we're the identical, right?
Sure.
In your scenario, we would have to be identical. Everything is identical. I just accept that. Well, then, then of course, but that is never going to be the case, right? You're always going to have something else that I don't, and I'm going to have something that you don't, right? So that means automatically I'm better suited for one thing, and then you may be better suited for something else, right? So that's reality. So
sure, but I feel like that's one of the most underlooked things that you can do or teach to your kids. Not necessarily you teach them yourself, but exposing them, like putting them in lessons and having them learn those languages. I feel like that is a big overlooked factor in life right now. A lot of people are like, okay, America specifically, right? Mm-hmm. English and everything else secondary is Spanish. School is either as a second language is Spanish or French, I think, growing in elementary schools. But going forward, if that's the new standard of bilingual, at least in America, and you're going into the 80% of people know these two languages, now you got to stand out more. Now you got another third language, fourth language, fifth language. Like my dad, at one point, I think he knew 7. Mm-hmm. It was Polish, English, Spanish, German, Russian, Portuguese, and something else. And he actually taught himself Portuguese. He went to Brazil on vacation and was like you said, I want to immerse myself and be able to speak the language. He's always been a big language guy.
He's passionate about that. I can tell, right? He wants to know these languages and like feel maybe like he belongs in there or whatever it may be.
I remember getting in his car the first time after he himself decided to pick up learning Portuguese. He was listening to either a music or like a talk radio in Portuguese,
in their language.
And I was like, what the hell? Like, what are you? Because I knew it was Portuguese or another language, but I'm like, what? Since when did you learn it? And he's like, I didn't learn it. I'm starting to now. And he's like, I want to learn it as fast as possible. And like you said, listening to it on the radio, watching movies or TVs it helps you get there that much faster. And also,
he's basically immersing himself in everything Portuguese. How are you not going to learn it, right?
Right.
It's like, because he's passionate, just like about anything else. If you're passionate, you're going to learn it, right? He's passionate about the language, he's going to learn it. But our whole thing here is it really like useful for him that much apart from him being passionate about it, right? Because if he goes to Portugal and starts speaking to them, can I do the same thing with the translator? Maybe not yet today, but in 10 years, right? I might be able to communicate in the exact same way as he is without never learning that language, right? And who knows, maybe right now there's an app already that is that advanced that you just talk to it. I mean, I never tried even with Siri. Maybe you can, right? And maybe it's the same thing. I'm not sure.
Could be. I'm curious, how many of our followers know 2 languages? How many know 3 or more? And which ones do you know? So drop a comment and
or how many actually have used a phone like that, a translator that went to a different country that they spoke a different language and actually communicated with them very, very clearly through that phone. Because if they have, then I don't see a benefit. But the whole thing is, we were talking about kids and them learning it. I still think that if there's an opportunity, do it, because it doesn't hurt. Absolutely doesn't hurt. And I think if you have, if your family speaks a different language, mom, parents, speak a different language, it's very easy to just naturally make them learn it. So at that point, it's like, why not,
Right.
So it doesn't hurt,
So drop a comment if you've used a translator in another country, or leave us a comment if you know 2, 3, 4, 5 languages and which ones.
I'll tell you, with the translator, we've used it in Tokyo when we were there, not like speaking through a phone to someone. Maybe we did it once, I don't even remember, but like reading everything off a menu or at a grocery store, you understand everything.
See, that's what I would be curious about. Is there an app that will scan like a menu? And is that what you use?
Yeah, the Google Translator.
So it scanned the menu and then it told you exactly what it was. Holy cow.
Yeah, so that's why when you see that, I literally see no point, because it's only going to get better to a point where I think 20 years down the line at max, it's going to be literally just like learning a language. So now it's like the only time you would want to do it is if you're a kid, because you're just naturally going to learn it. But then as an older adult, I mean, you could literally get this thing done through a phone. So now it comes into, are you passionate about it?